Good evening, Mayor and Council members. You are now live on YouTube and the time is 5 o'clock.
Okay, welcome everyone to tonight's special Livermore City Council meeting. It's a workshop. It's Tuesday, September 28th, 2021. It's a virtual special meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Bonanno.
Here.
Councilmember Carling.
Here.
Councilmember Kick.
Here.
Vice Mayor Monroe.
Here.
Mayor Warner.
Here. All right, this is a special workshop, and it's regarding our applicants' interviews for the appointment to the General Plan Advisory Committee. At this time, I'll ask if there's any member of the public that wish to address us on this special workshop item. That's the only item which will take public comment. Do we have anybody?
Mayor, no requests to speak have been received.
Okay, thank you. Next up, then we will proceed. What we're going to be doing is interviewing 11 applicants tonight. Each one will be allocated 15 minutes. We're going to be asking 5 questions, and the city clerk will let us know if after the 3rd question we're over the 9-minute mark, so that we can make sure we're staying on schedule. And then we're allowing a few minutes between applicants, but the idea is that for the questions and the answers for each applicant, it's 15 minutes. Is there anything else to the staff report or anything I need to mention at this point, City Clerk?
No, Mayor, that's everything.
Okay, thank you. So I really want to welcome everyone who's participating tonight. I know it was arduous to fill out the application. I think everyone did well. And we're now looking forward to these interviews to get to know you a little better. So I think we have the list of questions. Councilmember Bonanno will go first. I'll go second. Councilmember Carling third. Vice Mayor Monroe fourth, and Councilmember Kick fifth. And we have the questions. I think everyone is good to go. Our first candidate is Ellen Pete. So welcome. And
Excuse me, Mayor. I did have my hand up. I wanted a question, a point of clarification.
Sure.
I want to confirm that as we ask our questions, there will be a moment for follow-up in case that's necessary. Is my understanding that correctly?
I think so. If it seems important and necessary, and recognizing that we have allocated essentially on average 3 minutes a question, so it should be consequential.
Right. Thank you.
Sure. All right. I'd like to welcome Ellen Pete as our first interview candidate, and I would turn it over to Councilman. First of all, is Ms. Pete in the audience? I don't see her. Has she been added?
Mayor and council members, Ms. Pete has not joined us yet, but we do have Harshit Patel on, and she is the second in line. Would you like to start with her?
Yes. So welcome. And has she been admitted into the I got to turn my phone off, sorry. Has she been admitted into the meeting yet? Oh,
Yes,
there.
yeah.
Yes, I have. Well, welcome.
Hi. It's Harshit Patel, sorry. Anyway.
Hi.
No
Well,
big
welcome,
deal.
Mr. Patel. I hope you heard my introductory remarks.
Yes, I did.
Okay, well, great. And glad that you're here. Councilmember Bonanno has the first question for you.
All right.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Patel. Welcome. First question is, what is the purpose of the general plan and how is it used to guide decision-making?
Well, general plan's purpose, I would say, is to define the policies and the goals and the objectives that will deploy the plan and the timeline for the future. So it's to define policy goals and objectives. That's what I would say, right? Keeping future in the mind. Also, it's for infrastructure development to support future needs for the community and the city, right? And now that we are in this era, we have to be mindful of climate and renewable energies usage. So we have to be mindful of any plans we put together does account for or take into consideration for both climate and renewable energies.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. I've got the second question
All right.
for you, which is what are the top 1 to 2 issues that need addressing in Livermore through the general plan update? And how are you a good match for the task at hand?
All right. I would point out at least 3, and I put a couple of them on my application as well. First of all, was the BART extension to Livermore, right? I do commute, and my family does too, and I share the pain with the people that everybody has to go through the traffic, and it'd be better if we can extend the mass transit, right, to the community. That will ease off traffic and pain for community. That's number 1. Number 2, I would say the school bus services, which I know state of California has eliminated, but I think that would be another good initiative for city. And I stated that in my application too. It could be a joint venture with school district as well to implement this. And also, when we talk about school buses, it can be used as alternate energy vehicles or renewable energy vehicles, right? So it will reduce traffic in the city while it will use the clean energy as well. So those are the 2 I would say topmost. Now, third one, I know you guys asked only 1 or 2, but I have third one that I really want to put forward and make everybody aware is the health and safety of the community. And what I'll ask for that one is, I know city directly don't have involvement on what hospital to establish or so, but I think we need a major hospital in a city with emergency room, possibly with trauma center. And this is one thing is what we have now, but if you look at growth in population and future, right, about 20 years forward, fast forward, we definitely should consider having one. And main reason for hospital is also, right, it's as I said, its main thing is just the growth. And other one keeping in mind is like, so far we don't have any bad incidents in Livermore, which is we are thankful or grateful. But in response to, let's say, if anything happens to heavy arm or explosive attacks on community, are we ready? Or are we ready to defuse, right? That goes to my safety thing. If anything in extreme measure happens to city, are we ready to defuse any of those as a city, right? And if only Livermore cannot take on this initiative, right? We should partner with maybe Pleasanton, Dublin, or it could be joint venture with other cities too for hospital and response systems that we should build on. Right now, the last thing is you asked how am I good fit to it? It's just I'm thinking about community on these topics, which are too sensitive, too critical. And I just want to see if we move forward with this. I want to put up my efforts towards it and work on this. That's how I would say I'm better match for this.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Patel. Thanks for applying. Why would you be a good choice for the General Plan Update Advisory Committee? And what one word best describes what you would bring to the committee?
All right. As I respond in my previous question, right? It's my vision for the future needs, and I'm open to discussion with other committee members and citizens who we're gonna serve to make a better choice for what city needs and what we should be marching towards. And if you ask me to describe myself, I would describe myself as a caring nature person.
Thank you.
Yep.
Vice Mayor Monroe?
Mr. Patel, how would you serve the needs of the many diverse residents of this community, even if at times it may go against your personal preferences? In other words, how do you distinguish the community from the?
Yeah, so we'll need to find the ways to deep reach out to the citizen of Livermore, right? We gotta find different mechanisms how we get involved with citizens and get the feedback, right? That's the first thing, and we need to hear their concerns and focus on the concerns to address those for larger group of the citizens, right? So it's like or the larger concerns, right? Like everybody have concerns, but like what are the big majority of the people feel as a concerns, right? And we need to find, as I said, we need to find the mechanism we can reach out to citizens and hear them and what everybody's saying, like most commonly concerns, and we need to address those. And then we need to work on and focus on public needs more than not just what just one individual wants, just like what I want too. So that's how I would say, right? It's not about what I want. One thing is I want to serve the community. I want to help the community, help shape community better for future. But it's at the same time, we have to hear and listen and follow what citizens has to say.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Right?
Can you explain your experience in reviewing complex information and providing feedback? And how would you share complex technical information to audiences of various education levels?
Yeah, so I'll speak from my professional angle, right? Because that's the exposure that I have. So in my professional career, I came across many complex informations and issues, right? And yet I have to get exposed with the public life complex issues. I haven't been not exposed as much or not at all, I would say, right? But we need to make sure that we start with what the topic and subject is, right? What are we trying to address? That's the first thing. And then go after how information is stacked up and then try to break it down to the basics and ground level information first so we can explain to people, yes, the issue could be a complex thing. That's why I'm saying it's the information is stack of the things, but then we have to see what are the basics of it and where does it begin or what are the initiating points, right? And that's what we need to go after. That's what I would say. If you ask me to share a few examples in my professional career, I have been doing revenue projections for the company I work for. I'm doing inventory projections for them. And in the end, it's just, yes, it's all complex calculation or information that I crunch data in Excel. But in the end, what I tell them is how many days or weeks or months of inventory we have, or what is the final revenue we're gonna have? Is that against target or not? Although it's like a complex calculation on how everything gonna get aligned. Are we gonna get to the target or not? Or what are the issues we are trying to address to getting to the target that we have? But in the end, we just have to compare that with what was a target and what everything when we stack up as an information, what is going to align to our target. That's how I would say describing myself to complex information and how I would handle it.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. That concludes our question set.
No worries.
And really appreciate you taking the time to interview.
Okay, no worries. Anything
Okay.
else I can help with?
Is there any, you have a couple minutes, is there any one last thing that you think that we should know that we didn't ask you?
No, one thing I would say is that on my application, I did not share my professional resume. If you guys would like, I can send it over through email to the city office, and you guys are happy to look at it. But I didn't think it was needed or so I didn't submit. But then I was going through other applicants, and I see like people has wrote essays and submitted applications and resumes and stuff. And if needed, I'm most happy to send it. If not, it's fine too. So let me know.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. I think we've so I think we've got the flow there. The question is, if we do end a little early, do we want to then see if the next candidate is available and we can proceed, or do we want to just stay on the clock that we have? What's the preference of the council?
Why don't we proceed so as to not to make them hang out in the waiting room so long?
I agree.
Okay, so we'll do that. And okay, so I'll ask the city clerk, who's next available to interview?
The next interview is Jeremy Trope Massey, and he is available, and we can move him into promote to panelist.
Okay.
Jeremy, please turn your video on and your audio.
Mute. Let's see. I think there I am. All right.
Well, you're there, and so welcome, Mr. Trope Massey. I hope you heard the introductory comments that I made about we have 15 minutes, 5 questions, 1 per council member.
Yes, sir.
So thank you very much for taking the time to apply, and looking forward to learning more about you this evening.
All right.
So
Happy to be here.
Great. Our first question is from Councilmember Banana.
Good evening, Mr. Troop Massey. Welcome.
Hello.
First question is, what is the purpose of the general plan and how is it used to guide decision making?
All right. Well, pardon me if I look down. I wrote a few notes down, so I am paying attention. I'm just going to reference my notes every once in a while. But to me, after doing a bit of research on the update plan, in simple terms, to me, it's the roadmap. It seems to be the roadmap. It gives a city an opportunity to revitalize kind of the ranks and, taking another look at kind of a progressive vision of the city. More literally, it's the long range policy, document for growth and land use and transportation and things of that nature. And I think it's appropriate that every so often it's, you take a peek at it again. This is, I have been a little more active in the city, at least the last couple of years, and I was very happy to see this opportunity arise. It sounds like something anybody who wants to support their community should and would want to do, in building the plans, the landscape, where we're headed.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I've got the second question, which is what are the top 1 to 2 issues that need addressing in Livermore through the general plan update? And how are you a good match for the task at hand?
Right. We only have 3 minutes per, right? No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Well, what's great about these boards is just the range of perspective that gets to join the room. So I will just address one thing in particular, well, 2. I mean, affordable housing, being able to support the community that is, the foundation, is something I think is important. But hospitality, agritourism, wine country, getting those restaurants, food and beverage industry, that is definitely where my passion is. I've been in it for 15 years. It's one of the huge reasons why I came here to Livermore Valley, because of the potential of having a self-sustaining, selfishly, I get to drive, 5 minutes down the road to Nottingham Cellars to work, and drive back home. And I think that's awesome. And there's a lot of there's a lot of us, restaurant, retail, restaurants, service workers, teachers, or even service, whatever it may be. And I think it's cool that we should be able to afford to be here comfortably and engage in our communities in these capacities. So, revitalizing our food and beverage scene. I think most people here that live here in Livermore we're in a great place. We're headed in the right direction, but we really do have a long way to go. I get a very unique take at it, working in restaurants from Sabio to Range Life now at Nottingham. And we are hurting, and we were hurting even before the pandemic. And it's time to take off. And I think it's I think I can add an important perspective in that capacity for the next 15, 20 years, what this looks like for a wealth of a significant piece of our community.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yes,
We have,
my turn. Thank you, Mr. Troop Massey, for being here this evening and for applying.
All right.
Why would you be a good choice for the General Plan Update Advisory Committee? And what one word best describes what you would bring to the committee?
Mm-hmm. So I had my wife help me build this answer. I'm going to start with the one word. The word started with inclusion and we moved it to community. That has really been my whole upbringing. I'm a very tribal natured kind of guy in spirit. And that, from growing up in theater to work, growing up in sports to hospitality. I've always been a part of a team. And, I haven't always recognized that, nevertheless. I'm at a point now where I'm excited with what I have learned. There's much more to learn, but people are hungry for some new leadership. And I've been very blessed and fortunate to work with and around great leaders. And I'm excited to use those experiences in real time while continuing to learn. So, why the question is, why would you be a good choice? I'm hungry for leadership. I'm hungry for growth. This is my community, even though I've only been here for 3 years. I've got a house here. I've got a cottage operation here. I've been here. I'm in, I do a lot of things here. And I would like to continue. That. So I'm a Livermorean. Here we go.
Thank you.
Councilmember, it's
Sorry,
Yes,
trying to unmute.
Trish. And so I think, just for speed, we don't need me to introduce you each time.
I just had trouble unmuting. Sorry about that. How would you serve the needs of the many diverse residents of this community, even if at times it may go against your personal preferences? So, how do you balance your individual thoughts with those of the community?
This is a great question. I was excited to answer this one. In short, I would answer that question with consistency. I think that's what's most important. But aside from that, like I was alluding to, my experiences have allowed me to see a wealth of perspective, trials and tribulations, the whole gamut. And fast forwarding to exactly what I do now, which is hospitality, front-facing customer service interactions, and just having those, those can be challenging. I also manage a podcast now in the Valley, with the whole goal of addressing this topic of conversation, the fuel for progress. So, having tough conversations is not always fun. I don't always enjoy having them, but I kind of take pride in the responsibility of having to, in my family, I've been the guy who's always had to do that. So I'm happy to do it. And you just learn so much. I'm always humbled by what you take out of it once you, a lot of the times it's just getting over yourself, which is what we all struggle with in listening, properly listening. If the question was, how would you serve the needs? Like I said, with consistency. I won't always get it right, but I can promise you I'm genuine in my intention, regardless. And if we screw up, I'll raise my hand and tell you I did, and we'll try again. That's what else.
Thank you.
You will.
So for my question, I'd like you to explain your experience in reviewing complex information and providing feedback. This is a technical document that needs to be able to be translated to people of all different audiences, various education levels and experience levels. So what do you bring that's going to allow you to communicate those technical, complex things?
You know what, I would say, let's just, I'm a sommelier here in the Valley. Wine is a world that can be, a little intimidating to many people. And one of the things that I didn't know I would enjoy it as much as I do now, but being able to communicate with people better, meeting them in their journey rather than trying to make them understand what I might be trying to say. I guess the moral of that point is, wine's a very kind of scary world to live in. And I spent the last 10 years, tackling that, that issue on a more micro level, day to day in a very human form, with humans. So I think that's the most important piece. That's what I love about this industry, hospitality, the service industry, is I get the opportunity to do that every day, whether it's grand or whether it's just micro. But it is a principle and it is a practice that I can't get away from. So explain, that I'm a that's one reason. And yeah, I might just wrap it up there. And patience. I'm a patient cat too, so I can shut up long enough to listen and review well. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Really great that you applied, and we'll be on to the next one. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
So we're significantly ahead of schedule. The question is Ms. Pete available, or are we on? Or Alan Burnham?
Mayor, Miss Pete has joined us. She was on under a name we didn't recognize, but she is here and available for her interview. We will move her.
Great, great. You're going to let her in, and then we can proceed.
Ellen, Pete, please unmute yourself and turn your video on.
Yeah. Start.
Okay, you're sideways. Great. Well, welcome, Ms. Pete. I hope you heard the introductory comments I made. We have 5 questions, one from each of the council members. And really appreciate you taking the time to fill out the application and go through the interview process. Councilmember Bonanno has the first question for you.
Hi, good evening, Ms. Pete. Welcome. So first question is, what is the purpose of the general plan and how is it used to guide decision making?
Well, the general plan is a value statement of the city, and it sort of tells us who we are and what we want to do with the resources that we have. This document connects the citizens to policy decisions and the city leaders who make those policy decisions. The GP contains goals, objectives, and actions that lead toward desired outcomes in areas such as climate change, housing, economic development, water, transportation, etc.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have the second question. What are the top 1 to 2 issues that need addressing in Livermore through the general plan update? And how are you a good match for the task at hand?
Well, housing, I have 2, and the first one is housing, and the second is diversity for city employees. In the area of housing, Livermore is making some strides. And I would like to see us move with a greater sense of urgency regarding affordable housing for people who work in Livermore, like restaurant personnel or teachers or others who live here but can't comfortably plan on buying a home and staying here. Senior housing is important, and I think there was something addressed in the last city council meeting last week about senior housing. So we're moving in that direction, as well as provision for the unhoused. We need to be flexible as we deal with these issues and focus on impoverished and low-wage earners so that they can have proper housing in Livermore. And then the second is diversity for city employees. The city is about 76% white, 22% Hispanic, 12% Asian, and 6% of people who identify with 2 or more races, and 2% Black. And as I looked in the city, on the city profile, I could not see any information or any kind of breakdown in terms of race and ethnicity in city employees. So I would like for the city's workforce to align with the population percentages. And then I would like for us to have the management level employees of the city held responsible and accountable for meeting these hiring goals in a timely manner.
Okay. The second part of the question, you being a good match for the task at hand.
Why, of course.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, Ms. Pete, and thanks for applying. Why would you be a good choice for the General Plan Update Advisory Committee? And what one word would best describe what you would bring to the committee?
I'm going to hold off on that one word for a minute and just talk. First, I'm an engaged voting resident of Livermore, and I desire to have equitable attention to the needs of all of our citizens. I'm part of the underrepresented diverse community, and that sort of makes me a good candidate. I am also fairly new to Livermore. I've only been here 9 years. And for those who have been here forever, 9 years makes me an infant. But because I'm fairly new here, I'm not stuck on defending what we have always done, even when it no longer works. In addition, I've lived in several different regions of this country, and I have seen how others address the needs of a city and how they've handled those issues. I'm a good communicator and mediator, and I'm a creative problem solver. So I guess the word that may describe me is willing and able.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, and that brings it to me. And my question is, how would you serve the needs of the many diverse residents of this community, even if at sometimes it may go against your personal preferences?
I could never support anything that would harm any segment of the community. I would not support anything that is unfair or that is unjust. I work very actively to be in touch with the concerns of the general community, and especially the diverse aspects of the city. And I'll give you some examples. I attend a reconciling church that is welcoming to all people, including the LGBTQIA community. We do many, many service-oriented ministries, and we serve people regardless to where they are people of faith or not. We serve because it's in our religious tradition to do so. Additionally, my grandchildren do not attend the school that they were assigned to right across the street from me. We chose to send our children to Junction Avenue because Junction Avenue is a diverse school and it has a dual language program. In addition, I attend all kinds of community celebrations, whether it's Pride or other heritage gatherings. I participated in Black Lives and AAPI initiatives over the last year in particular. I joined my church and the Interfaith Connect and the city of Livermore in holding the Rally for Love for several years prior to COVID-19. And I'm going to give you a brief story to maybe let you get to know me a bit better. My church voted to build a new office space. I voted no to building that office space because I thought we should repurpose existing space. However, I was outvoted by many, many, many. However, I served on the building committee and gave my financial support to building that new space. This is evidence of my ability to voice an unpopular opinion, but accept the will of the majority, which I feel is critical.
Okay, thank you very much.
I got distracted by your good stories. I almost forgot my question. Please explain your experience reviewing complex information and providing feedback. And how would you share this complex and technical document with the everyday community, an audience that has various education levels and experience levels?
First, I have very strong communication skills. I listen to people carefully. I watch the body language and the facial expressions to ensure that I understand what they're saying and that they understand what I am saying. My theory is that I don't understand something unless I explain it simply. When you can explain something simply, you hit everybody. An example, I'm going to give you lots of examples of where I have communicated well. As a 10-year-old child in Memphis, Tennessee, I canvassed my neighborhood and enlisted unregistered, hesitant adults to get on a chartered bus and be taken to register to vote. I guess we got about 200 people from my neighborhood. I have taught every grade from first grade through graduate school, from Tennessee to Washington, D.C. to Massachusetts. I have served as a Head Start consultant nationally, served on Southern Association of Accreditation of Schools for Memphis City Schools. I was a director of church relations for a $500 million annual budget urban healthcare system that had regional, rural hospitals in 3 southern states. In this position, I related to 4 United Methodist bishops, 30 district superintendents, and numerous interfaith leaders and their congregations. I was executive director of a social service agency with programs such as Dress for Success, certified nurse training, and we had several child care centers for typical and special needs children. We had several thrift stores, we did food programs, and we did rental assistance programs. I also have had to relate to major funders, to city and state governments. Therefore, I feel like I can communicate across ethnic, economic, and educational lines.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're on to the next applicant, and I really appreciate you spending your time with us this evening. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Is Mr. Burnham available?
He is, sir. Alan Burnham, please unmute yourself and turn your video on when we put you into the meeting.
Okay, I presume you can see me now.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Mr. Burnham, for joining us. You listened to the introduction and you know that we got 5 questions, one from each of us.
Yes.
Great. And I think we're starting with Councilmember Bonanno.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Burnham. Thank you for being here and welcome. First question is, what is the purpose of the general plan and how is it used to guide decision making?
Well, the general plan is the highest level planning document governing the development in Livermore. It provides the framework for more detailed plans for specific portions of the town. One that's been a lot in the news recently, of course, is the downtown specific plan. So the general plan includes a vision of what we hope to be, where we're going for the next 20 years, and an assessment of where we are now in order to figure out how to get there. It really is, in many ways, a visioning document. The current plan includes a discussion of community character. That's not required by state law, but such discussions always occur in Livermore. It seems to be part of our character. The current plan covers how we hope to evolve through 2025. And of course, it deals with issues you're all familiar with: land use, housing needs, traffic circulation, infrastructure, parks, climate change, and public safety. And including public safety are seismic issues, flood, and fire threats.
And did you want to say anything about how it guides decision making, or did you feel like you got that?
Well, in fact, it is the roadmap. It essentially outlines the criteria by which you make land use decisions.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. I've got the second question. What are the top 1 to 2 issues that need addressing in Livermore through the general plan update? And how are you a good match for the task at hand?
I'd like to start off by talking a little bit about predicting the future. Predicting the future is not just a linear extrapolation of the present. That said, of course, finishing the downtown is a very important issue, but it's really part of the vision that was created 20 to 30 years ago. So what we really need to do in the next general plan is think about what has changed in terms of the external driving factors in the character of our community that means that we maybe need to go in a slightly different direction. So the housing needs have gotten greater in the Bay Area. We have housing directives. We have much more severe transportation challenges than we've had before. We have a much higher high-tech industry in the Tri-Valley than 20 years ago. So, and then there's also other ways that technology have changed. What are the impact of online commerce, telecommunication, autonomous vehicles, which are not here yet, but will be soon, and climate change? All these things need to be taken into consideration to make sure they are properly considered in terms of the general plan. We need to make sure we can accommodate these external driving factors. Also, if you think about places like the wine industry, the environment for the wine industry is different now than it was 20 to 30 years ago. And so many people say they love the wine industry, but what is really needed so that it can flourish in the face of increasing competition? And part of that is also maintaining a healthy jobs population balance. We have a pretty good one now, but we need to make sure that we have housing that can cover all of our population needs. And finally, another aspect of that is our demographics are changing. Other speakers have mentioned this. Non-Hispanic white populations actually decreased in absolute numbers. Maybe most people don't know the biggest increase in the last 10 years is the Asian population, particularly those from India. And so the question comes, are we going to follow the trends in Dublin? Also, our older population has actually increased from 5,500 to 12,000. That's an increase from 7.5% to 13.5%. How we are going to accommodate those people in terms of their housing? That was part of the downtown agreement, but so far we haven't been able to move ahead on that housing plan. So these are the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about. Not only what we think we want in our insular environment, but also how are we going to accommodate the external demands of places like the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the Housing Authority.
Okay, and the second part of the question was how you're a good match for the 1 to 2 issues you enumerated.
Yeah, and I have a broad perspective on things, and the ability to collect and process large amounts of data into a coherent plan. That's really been the hallmark of my professional career, and I think if you look at my record, you can see that.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Burnham, and thanks for applying. Why would you be a good choice for the General Plan Update Advisory Committee, and what one word best describes what you would bring to the committee?
I had trouble coming up with one word, so I came up with a hyphenated word. It's called Visionary Integrator, and that's what I would bring to the committee. None of us really have the full picture of the hopes and aspirations of everybody in our community. We are a diverse set of people. At the same time, I have many grounding experiences that enable me to connect with different aspects of people's life experience here. I've been a parent. I've been a bicycle commuter to the lab. I've been a commuter to the peninsula, and I can tell you there is no such thing as good public transportation to the peninsula. I've been an independent consultant and businessman, and I've been an active participant in community service. These experiences help me understand more about where other people are coming from. I would be actively collecting and processing citizen input. I'm not shy about asking people about their opinions and discussing them with them, and I'm adept at processing and interpreting data. I recognize the need to proactively seek out the views of those not always involved, and I would not be unduly swayed just by those who shout the loudest when it comes to meetings. At the same time, we must not discard the input of visionaries simply because they see something that the rest of us have not yet recognized. We need to essentially step back and consider this plan in terms of both reflection and analysis. Again, that's a lot of what I've done in my career. And my work on the downtown, along with Mayor Warner, shows the ability to essentially bring together people for a coherent plan.
Thank you.
Okay, I get the next question, and that is, how would you serve the needs of the many diverse residents in this community, even if at times they go against your personal preferences? How do you think about the community versus the individual?
Well, just because I prefer wine doesn't mean that I think we should ban craft breweries. I mean, we all have different interests and aspirations. And the planning document really should be based on not the opinions of the individual participants creating the plan, but of the community as a whole. We all have our own preferences and visions for our future, and we need to make sure that our plan enables everybody to pursue their passions and really accomplish what they want to in their lives within our community. We need to also respect that people will have different objectives in their life, and it could be economic, could be cultural, could be religious. All those things ought to be consistent with the enabling atmosphere that our plan generates. If I'm the minority in any given decision, and I feel like I've had my chance to give my say, then I certainly will go on and support it. I'll say an example of one thing that I do not like, and that's I'm very upset that some people have disparaged locating workforce housing downtown on land purchased by affordable housing funds. And this is an example of the contrary. I think that kind of behavior should not be tolerated. And I support the majority here and would stand up very strongly for it. And I also seek a plan that is helps the underserved population. And in fact, in my most recent business venture, I'm hoping to provide Tri-Valley Haven with a better place for their food pantry.
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that last sentence, Alan. I'm glad I'm glad some of those connections worked out. I would like you to explain your experience in reviewing complex information and providing feedback to the technical staff. And then also, how do you share that complex information and technical information to audiences with really varying levels of education and experience levels?
Well, in my professional career, I've done lots of presentations and publications. I actually have hundreds of publications ranging from a textbook on chemical kinetics to letters in the Independent trying to address community issues. And so that experience has given me the range of things from basically arcane aspects of science to things of public interest. Acquaintances have told me that they like the letters that I've written. You may have your own opinion about that, but and some people have actually told me I should be writing more often. Another example of how this would get involved in the general plan is I was the editor and a subject matter expert for a 1,000-page development application to the Bureau of Land Management in Colorado. This was accepted, but it shows the idea of having to incorporate a variety of complex information into a comprehensible document, which is understandable to somebody who really doesn't care about the nitty-gritty details, perhaps. I think important in all these is to make sure one understands that what you say and what you write depends on the audience and the situation. I've also tutored middle schoolers through the READY program, and how you deal with tutoring math at the middle school level is quite different than how you're going to deal with it at the high school or college level. I also taught at Stanford. It was a completely different ballpark. In my work with Quest Science Center, I've designed science experiments that have tried to give people a way of interacting with science at their level. At the most recent event, I had a water table that was a great joy to my 2-year-old granddaughter and the kids in the park, but also gave me the chance to really talk about some more advanced hydrodynamics to some of the more advanced people who were coming along. So I think that the issue of the ability to dynamically change the level of sophistication of the information, depending on the audience and purpose, is an important skill that I have and have practiced throughout my career. And one final thing that I find is that it's fine to say the simple answer is the best, but I don't think that's always true. Sometimes a simple answer really isn't good enough. It doesn't demonstrate that the person answering the question actually understands the issue. And so I think that's an example of how one needs to make sure that the answer is not just simple, but also comprehensive and complete.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Burnham. Appreciate the time you took to do the application and to appear to answer the questions tonight. So thank you. I think we're going to, given our schedule here, we're going to need a second with a little bit of consultation with the city clerk as to who we have in line and what we do. We have people ready to go? And then I would ask the council, we've been going at this for nearly an hour, and we have breaks put in here. We could take a 10 minutes to consolidate our notes now, and then give the city clerk time to make sure that everybody's lined up for for possibly realigning our schedule. Does that make sense to everyone?
I'll go with the majority. I'm just wondering if we might get 15 minutes now, since we saved a little time, and that'll give us a chance to get a bite to eat, maybe. I don't know if anybody else.
That's
I support that.
Yes.
That's even better.
We can take shorter
Okay.
breaks later, but
So-
maybe we have a little time now.
So we're supposed to start again at 6:30 actually. So we're trying to accelerate things, and it's 5 of 6 now. Would you want to see if we can start up at 6:20 or so? How much time would you like?
I think that's good with me.
Okay, 6:20. So let's you guys can come back at 6:20. Let me talk with the city clerk and see to what extent we can contact people and get our schedule figured out. Okay, so City Clerk, we're really talking about accelerating Mr. Graves from 6:30 to 6:20. And that's a 10-minute acceleration. Does that seem reasonable that you're able to contact people and we can get going on a 10 minutes sooner than they were anticipating?
Yes, Mayor, we'll reach out to him.
Okay, well, let's try that and see what's available. So we'll come back at 6:20 and begin the rest of our schedule. Okay.
Yep, thanks.
Have a good dinner, everyone.
Okay. Okay, it looks like we're all back and it's 6:20. Welcome back, everyone. We're on to our second set of interviewees. And next up is Mr. Thomas Matt Graves. Is he in the meeting?
Yes, sir, he is. Thomas Matt Graves, please turn your video and your audio on. We're promoting you to panelist.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome, Mr. Graves. Good to see you. Thanks for filling out the application and making yourself available for the interview this evening. Hopefully you heard the introduction that we've got 5 questions for you, one from each of us, with 15 minutes allocated. So, and the first up is Councilmember Bonanno.
Thank you, Mayor Warner. Good evening, Mr. Graves, and welcome. This first question is, what is the purpose of the general plan and how is it used to guide decision-making?
Yeah, so general plan is a document that provides policy, guidelines, and strategy for future development. It's used in a lot of different ways. It will specifically call out land use, like residential or commercial retail, how we conserve land, placement of infrastructure, items like that. It's really a reflection of a city's goals and values, how they want the city to evolve over time. So it's a lot of value judgments and calls through documents formalized. And now we're starting to see general plans starting to have more robust strategies around climate change and their CO2 footprints and reduction goals, which is encouraging. They're used by a lot of different parties. So developers or businesses who are interested in coming to Livermore will reference them. Before investing in the move itself, they want to see if they're allowed to do what they want to be doing in Livermore. So that's one party that would use a general plan. Citizens use it when forming them, like now, to make those decisions beforehand. But then also the city uses a general plan when approving uses or applicants. So lots of different parties use them, but all with the same goal of forming the city in the future.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm next up with the second question. What are the top 1 to 2 issues that need addressing in Livermore through the general plan update? And how are you a good match for the task at hand?
Yeah, so I think the top 1 or 2 issues that I strongly feel are issues are accessible housing options for all future residents or those who want to become residents, as well as meeting the challenges of climate change, especially in terms of drought or CO2 emissions. So how do we accommodate the people who want to be here while reducing the overall CO2 footprint, but also getting less rainfall? So I think those 2 issues are the 2 big ones that I see for us. I feel like I'm well tasked to tackle these issues because I work in housing, I work in affordable housing. I'm a project manager. I work in the downtown affordable site. So aside from finding these issues kind of personally interesting and pressing, I actually work daily on Livermore's response to the housing crisis. I find it my way of kind of giving back to Livermore and helping. And it's something that I care about. So I draw upon this professional experience so I can, really kind of provide that back to how we tackle these 2 issues.
Okay. Thank you.
A follow-up, if I may.
Yeah.
Yeah. Given that you do work for Eden Housing, and housing is obviously an issue and a passion. How would you bring that? How would you set that aside? And if you'd like, you can hold on that. It may fit in with my question as well. So up to you which way.
I'm happy to repeat myself. So I probably will end up say something similar. I think I asked my supervisors at Eden if I could be on that project initially because I wanted to give back and help. I grew up in Livermore. I did my Eagle project in Livermore. I wanted to give back to my community, and that's my main motivation in being on that project to begin with. So I am able to recognize that is the main goal. What is the best thing for the community? And that is what motivates me.
Good evening, Mr. Graves.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good evening, Mr. Graves, and thanks for applying. My question is, why would you be a good choice for the general plan update advisory committee, and what one word best describes what you would bring to the committee?
Yeah, I guess the one word I landed on is perspective, as in my own perspective I have. So I mentioned my professional perspective as a resident already. And then in addition to that, I grew up in Livermore. And so I've seen how it's responded to growth and growth pressures. I'm in an age and income group that's finding it a little difficult to break into home ownership in our city. So that may eventually force me out, leave my family, who I'd like to stay close with. I'm also part of the LGBT community, and so I deeply appreciate the inclusive environment that Livermore has fostered and developed over time. That's come a long way since I was much younger growing up in Livermore. And so I really appreciate things like our local pride, where I can meet people of my own community. So I want the general plan to foster multiple housing options and respond to these challenges, because I know how it could impact who gets to stay in Livermore. And if the general plan is inadvertently forcing some groups to leave as opposed to others, it'll impact how the remaining residents feel, and they may not find their place. So it's not just my professional perspective, but my personal background and history with the city, all that combined, I feel gives me a unique perspective.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, and then the aforementioned question that may be a little bit duplicative. How would you serve the needs of the many diverse residents of the community, even if at times it may go against your personal preferences?
Yeah, so through Eden, through my day job, I take part in community outreach quite a bit. And so I feel like I've developed a bit of an ear for hearing diverse concerns from the community and coming up with solutions and responses to these concerns. I actually really enjoy this part of my job. It's really fun to present something that I work on every day to a group of people who actually want to listen and who are interested about it. And so I value getting the different perspectives and takes on my work. And that would be the same I would feel the same for the general plan process. When you understand that other residents care about where they live as much as we do or I do, then it makes it much easier to listen to the message that they're getting across. That's very relatable. And so I feel like that would also be part of my process. I may have my own personal preferences, but so do others. And really, I understand that a well-functioning city and society is the harmonious integration of all these different perspectives, not just one single perspective dominating the conversation. And since I want to live in a harmonious society and city, I have a vested interest in making sure that all of those different perspectives are being considered and integrated into everything that we do.
Great, thank you.
So, as you know, the general plan can be a technical and complex document. How do you think you would do at translating that technical and complex information to audiences with various education and experience levels? And since I think you've alluded to the fact that you have done that before, maybe you can give some specific examples.
Yeah, I think I would do well, because again, I mentioned I just enjoy that participation, that back and forth with the community. It's different areas care about different things, and so it's fun to kind of figure out. One of my other sites is in South San Jose. They really care about parking in a very specific way. Everybody obviously has concerns about parking. Theirs was a very unique flavor of that, and so I had to actually meet with individual residents to kind of get the history on that. And then I had to dive into parking code, traffic studies. I had to get a lot of information on our residents, how it would impact the neighborhood, translate that down and convey it onto the community, knowing that they had certain concerns. So that's kind of a typical process. A lot of times I'm getting environmental review documents. I did not go to grad school to understand those, and yet I have to integrate them and relay that information on. I think I've learned a lot by noticing how I learn and relay information. I start with what I know. I review the document. I'm asking my own questions and taking note of what kind of questions I'm asking. And then I get to the endpoint, the conclusion, and thinking back on what was I asking, what would it have nice to have been known starting out. Having thought of that makes it very easy to then turn around and explain it to someone else without having to get into all the technical details, you can very quickly and concisely walk someone through if you've had to walk yourself through. So I do it all the time. It's another very interesting part of my job that I enjoy.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Very efficient answers here, and we're ahead of schedule. So thank you so much for the application and appearing before us this evening. And we're now on to, I think, Mr. Strout. So thank you, Mr. Graves.
Thanks.
Asa Strout, please unmute yourself and turn on your video. We're promoting you to panelist.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Nice to see everybody again.
Good evening, Mr. Strout. Thanks for applying and appearing before us. And I think you heard the introduction. We have 5 questions for you, 1 each. And if you've been seeing any of the others, you see we kind of get right into it. So the first person to ask is Councilmember Bonanno.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Strout. Welcome. Thanks for being here. The first question is, what is the purpose of the general plan and how is it used to guide decision making?
Well, the purpose of the general plan is to effectively provide a blueprint to city staff and the city council on multiple elements that really impact almost every facet of the city, from housing to transportation, to city safety, to even noise pollution. So it really is a whole city like blueprint for the next 20 years that will be used by yourselves as you guys make decisions on when and where to make development choices and what goes there, and for the city in terms of what to propose to you guys in terms of what they think that they should do for the city of Livermore. So it really is, it's a very technical document in that sense, because it's going to have a lot of details, which is why it takes 2 years to build. But on top of that, it really is a reflection of the city's community values. And what I mean by that is, everybody in Livermore can say we're really dedicated to making sure Livermore is a welcoming city. But if you fail to include things like additional housing in Livermore, or some other elements like transportation to make it easier to move around, you really aren't showing from a codified perspective how welcoming you are as a community. Because in light of saying we are a welcoming community, on paper, you aren't. So it really does reflect what we all as a community believe our community values. There was that vision. I mentioned welcoming because we just had this vision workshop last weekend, and that was what almost everybody, census was, we are a welcoming community. So, to do that, we need to make sure that we reflect that within our general plan.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, I've got the second question. What are the top 1 to 2 issues that need addressing in Livermore through the general plan update? And how are you a good match for the task at hand? So from a top line, I think most will agree over the next couple of days that housing or a variation of cost of living is going to be probably the #1 issue for Livermore. It's not unique to Livermore, but it is probably going to be the #1 issue. And then to complement that is going to be sustainability, long-term sustainability over the next 20 years. And the reason I choose those two is we have multiple stories. I mean, you heard it just now, where people who live in Livermore are beginning to not be able to afford Livermore when they should, because they have nice jobs. Everyone should be able to live in a community that they choose if you're working hard to be in that community. They shouldn't feel like they have to move somewhere else because it becomes too expensive. But what I mean by sustainability is just adding housing isn't going to be enough, because when you add housing, you have to have additional support systems for it, like you have to increase water usage, you have to increase your energy infrastructure, you have to increase your waste infrastructure. So just to say housing is an issue and to ignore those only looks at a half, maybe even a third of the picture of what the work the city needs to do in order to enable a #1 issue like housing. So those are probably the top
two issues that I would call out. And then, throw in an extra one in terms of sustainability would be economic sustainability, because, Livermore has an opportunity to be an economic anchor for the Tri-Valley and much of the East Bay if the next 20 years are planned well. And I look at myself as somebody who is good at addressing that, because I do have that whole picture. My professional career is as a business analyst, so my job is to not look at just one aspect of something. It's really to look at the entire picture of my company to make sure that this one request doesn't mess up, or if there's a chance for opportunity somewhere else, to help identify that as well. So, my whole professional career has been all about making sure that a piece of the puzzle can either enhance other pieces and make sure that they're there, or to not make it so that just because this thing sounds really good, that it's going to mess up, other parts A, B, and C down the road. So I do have that perspective in my professional career. And, one of the things is, it's just, I've dedicated my time to learning how Livermore works. Vice Mayor Monroe and I did the Key to the City program together, which is an amazing program that everybody should do, because it lays out what exactly the city does. And it's extremely eye-opening how much the city is responsible for. And somebody who doesn't have that full picture of what the city is responsible for is not going to be able to provide the level of insight, or, oh, wait, we have to think about this when also adding something like this to such an important document like the general plan.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Strout, and thanks for applying. Why would you
Thank
be a
you.
good choice for the General Plan Update Advisory Committee, and what one word best describes what you would bring to the committee?
So I think the one word that would describe myself on the committee really is committed. I'm committed to Livermore. I was born here. I love Livermore. I talk Livermore up to, all my coworkers saying, if you want somewhere great to live, raise your family, Livermore is an amazing place to do it. And I've been involved, making sure that, doing my part volunteering since Cub Scouts, and since moving back 5 years ago, because I took a small stint in Oakland because I was working out of San Francisco, and a 20-minute commute was wonders. But 5 years, my wife and I expected our first kid, and now we have two. And selfishly a little bit, I want to ensure that 20 years from now, when they're adults, that the effort it takes to live in Livermore is not as hard. And I want to make sure that when they're adults, that Livermore is in a much, I don't want to say better, because Livermore is in a good place now, but you know what I mean by it maintains that quality for the next 20 years, so that when they're adults, that they can do that. But I say that selfishly for my kids, but having grown up as a single mom raising three, I empathize to those parents and to those adults who aren't able to get involved. I'm very fortunate enough to be able to get involved. I have, my wife and I both, work full time, and, we're able to spend our time doing things that we are able to do. And, this is something that I want to dedicate my time to. Not everybody has that luxury. And growing up, experiencing not being able to get that luxury, I know how important it is for those who can to step up and be a part of communities like this, and making sure they're giving back to the community. And I kind of do it not just for myself, but for those who cannot, because I know it is so hard for some people.
Thank you.
Good evening. My question is, how would you serve the needs of the many diverse residents of the community, even if at times that goes against your personal preferences? How do you balance your personal preferences with community needs?
Yeah, so I take my responsibility as a representative of anything, in this case, Livermore, extremely seriously. So when it comes to ensuring the voices of others are heard, I completely and 100% understand it. It kind of goes back to the anecdote that I just mentioned, where, I know how many people who don't have the luxury to do what, even spending the time to do an interview like I am today. So to even be able to be here today is a luxury for many people. And I take that very seriously. It's an honor to be able to do this, and if selected, to be able to then extend that and be a representative of Livermore. Everybody comes with their unique world perspective, but it's also about having, being able to take a step back, which I've found that it does take a lot of work to step back, but over the last 5 years, being committed to Livermore and being involved, going to council meetings, going to all sorts of meetings, and interacting with so many different people, that it takes work, and it's a challenge that I'm ready to step up to and take. But it does take work, and I feel like that over the last 5 years, I've been sharpening that tool so that I can do that and really represent Livermore as a whole, not just for my own personal beliefs.
I actually have a follow-up to that, which is,
Sure.
so in a couple of questions, you've said that you do this for people who can't. I'm not sure how one would put this into the general plan, but how do you think about making it possible, so instead of representing, you are enabling those people to represent themselves? Can you imagine that being part of what the general plan is?
That's, oh man, to represent themselves. I mean, there's so many other ways. I mean, the easiest way I can think of off the top of my head is being a conduit for them, right? Like I'm not one to shy away from engaging with people. On social media, I jump into the most interesting places in Livermore discourse head first to discuss topics with them. But in terms of getting people to advocate for themselves, I really try to get people to participate as well. So one of the things that I've done in the past, and over the last year and a half during the pandemic, it's been harder because I think life's just been on hard mode the last year and a half, but is sharing information on like what's going on in the community and getting feedback from that. Either trying to get people to go to council meetings, as I've done in the past, and getting people more involved that way, but getting people more involved in just a conversation, and hopefully a polite conversation about things like the general plan, and getting their feedback. And so then if they provide feedback to me, it allows me to think about what their perspective is and then bring that to the committee as well. And so then it's not, like I said, it's more of a conduit. It's not a direct representation. I mean, like, I'd love to get more people involved. And I know we've had the vision meeting, we just had the in-person meeting. And again, talking about being fortunate, if there's more situations like that, and hopefully the world opens up a bit more and it's a little safer to start having more community meetings, it's definitely something I'd want to participate in and help with, to get more people involved in the process. So I do think that more people involved in this process will make for a much better outcomes for Livermore.
Thank you.
Hi. As you know, the general plan can be a complex and technical document, and in order to create a general plan, you need to review complex and technical documents and give feedback to that staff. Can you explain your ability and experience to translate that information to people with a variety of education and experience levels?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing to understand when communicating to any audience is who the audience is. And in my personal career, again, as a business analyst, I have the opportunity to look at not just the whole company as a whole, but then the ins and outs. So I'm an IT business analyst, so that comes with a lot of software. So it is a lot of technical documentation that sometimes is very much over my head because it is. My technical skills can only go so far. But it does really come down to being able to look at this document, digest it, take your time, understanding what is truly there, and not being afraid to ask those who may know something that you don't for clarification. I always find that that's extremely important to any scenario, being able to ask for help. But when it comes to the communication part of this technical documentation, it really does revolve around who you're talking to. Like in my personal career, I can't say the same thing to the CEO as I would to a developer, right? So when we're talking about bringing on new software, so I implement software. The CEO doesn't care the who's and the what's in the house. They just says, what is the high level of the what? How is it going to benefit me? But the details of talking to the developer requires, like, hey, a little bit more technical details and a little more obvious because, they don't have a lot of nuanced they don't have a lot of time to go for the nuance. They just want, what are the specifics? So understanding who the audience is, and then also then taking that to the general plan is who we're talking to, right? Like some people, you can quote the letter of the law and say, because of section 212, article B, that's why we can't do it. And they go, that's perfect. That's all I need to hear. But other individuals, you need to say, okay, well, there's a law on the books and it keeps us from doing X, Y, and Z. And you need to give them real world examples and understanding who the communication, I mean, that's like almost marketing 101 kind of thing. Which, when I need help with, I usually ask my wife because she's the marketing person. But that's kind of how it comes down to, is understanding who you're talking to and tailoring the message specifically for them, so that it causes a little bit of extra work, but it does create a more concise communication when you're talking their language and not somebody else's. And sometimes, actually, and for parts of Livermore, actually, a different language. And I think Livermore's been doing a much better job with their announcements in multiple languages compared to maybe 5+ years ago.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, thank you so much for filling out the
you.
application and joining us this evening, and for your answers. We're now on to the next candidate, and again, thank you for joining us this evening. Is Mr. Fields available? It's a little early.
Mayor and council members, we were unable to confirm Mr. Fields attending his interview, and he is not logged on currently. We do have the next interview candidate logged on, Mr. Goff.
Great. And before we start, have you been able to contact the rest and let them know we are considerably ahead of schedule? Are they okay with that?
We can continue to reach out. Do you think you'll take a break at 7:50?
Well, we could. It depends on where we're at. At the moment, we had our last break and we came back at 6:20. I wouldn't take a break before 7:20. But let's see where they are. But if you can continue to reach out and let us know if people are available to advance the schedule, it'd be good to know. And we're perfectly fine with keeping to the original schedule that was posted if that's when people are available. So to make sure there's no pressure on them if they're not easily available. So we'll keep to the original schedule if that's what they desire. But if they are available, that's great.
Understood. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So you said we're on to Mr. Goff now?
Yes, sir. Jim Goff, please unmute yourself and turn your video on. You're being promoted to panelist.
Hello?
Hello, we can see you, but you might want to rotate your device.
Sorry, I'm using my phone for this.
Yeah, great.
Is
No
that
problem.
better?
Yeah. Yeah, otherwise we'd have to tilt our heads. Anyway, thank you for joining us this evening. And I trust you heard the introductory remarks, perhaps, that we've got 5 questions, one from each of us. And welcome. Thank you for joining us. And the first person to ask a question is Councilmember Bonanno.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Goff.
Good evening.
And welcome. So your first question is, what is the purpose of the general plan and how is it used to guide decision-making?
The purpose in the general plan is to give the city leaders and planners a guideline for development. In a short answer, gives the city leaders a guideline for all the aspects of the city. And it's a very useful tool in that process, as far as by getting that straight, you get the rest of the guidelines straight for everything.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have the second question. What are the top 1 to 2 issues that need addressing in Livermore through the general plan update? And how are you a good match for the task at hand?
This one I wasn't quite so sure about, but I believe that that housing element is a big issue for Livermore right now, as it is for most all the other entities in the state, being that the state is putting down such rough guidelines as to all the new housing needs and RENA numbers, et cetera. This would also be a good area for my expertise in this area, for the position in which I've been in the planning commission for the past 4 years in the county of Alameda, and also served 11 years on the Board of Zoning Adjustments for the county of Alameda. So I've got a lot of experience in this area.
Okay. All right, I guess we're on to the next question.
All right, thank you, and good evening, Mr. Goff. Why would you be a good choice for the General Plan Update Advisory Committee, and what one word best describes what you would bring to the committee?
The one word I came up with was experience. I kind of briefly touched upon that in the last question. Oh, sorry about that. My experience with being on such, not this a committee, but the actual planning commission, zoning adjustments board, and also I've been a Livermore resident for, my family's been here since the 40s. I've seen it grow. I've seen the amazing things that have happened in this town. I've raised my family here. I'm on to my grandkids here. I just have a lot of ties to this town, and I'd really like to help in this next venture. If it wasn't for that ad in the Independent, I don't think I would have ever known that this was going to happen. And I'm excited for the chance.
Thank you.
All right, so I get the next question, and that is, how would you serve the needs of many diverse residents in this community, even if at times it goes against your personal preferences? In other words, how do you think about the community in the context of your own individual needs? Or
Well,
the other way around, sorry.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. You know, I think it's really important to listen to the community. And in listening to the community, you have to, well, I'm assuming in this committee, we'll be getting more of written responses and emails and such as that. I'm not so sure if the committee is going to be holding open meetings or roadshow type meetings or what. But by listening to the community, somebody in this position, you're supposed to represent the community and listen to them and get to their needs, along with, you know, making your own judgments. But it's very important to listen to the community. And if it wasn't for the community, it would be 5 or 7 or 10 people making a decision to their own needs without listening. You have to listen.
All right, thank you.
So as I'm sure you know with your experience, these are complex documents, and you will not only need to review that complex information and then provide feedback to technical staff. You'll need to do communication the other way around to community members with various levels of education and experience. Can you explain how you might go about translating that information to various audiences?
Well, you know, I don't have a very good written vocabulary, so I'm not very strong in that aspect. But as far as translating to audiences, I'm very good at speaking with the community, listening to the community and speaking with them. And if they don't understand, I like to make sure that they understand whatever process we were in. I had advice one time from a planning commissioner 10 years ago before I even hit the commission. It says, if you don't understand, ask. And if you still don't understand, ask again. And it's very important that everybody understands what's going on, not only our leaders, but the community in which you're trying to represent.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we've gone through our 5 questions. And we're going to be on to the next candidate. Really appreciate you taking the time to fill out the application and join us this evening. And
Thank you.
we'll be going through the process. So thank you.
Mhm.
So I'd like to ask the city clerk, we've had no success in getting Mr. Fields at this point?
No, Mayor, not at this point.
Okay, and we're close to the originally scheduled time for him. Again, if you could try reaching him, see if he's got any time this evening. So do we have anybody else available? Because we're now, the way I look at it, we're an hour ahead of schedule.
Mayor, we are still working on confirming a couple of people logging in just a little bit early. If you'd like to take a short 10-minute break, then I'm confident we could have somebody on the line when you return.
Okay, so we have no one at the moment. And so you would like us to come back at 7:05, or do you want a little bit more time?
Maybe 7:15 would be great.
I think why not? I mean, we need to be considerate of the people who are planning a totally different time. So let's not rush it. We have the time. So 7:15. Okay, good. I'd like to ask the city clerk, how are we doing on being able to contact people?
Mayor and council members, we have all three of our remaining candidates on the line, and we were going to take them just a little bit out of order, if that's all right with you, based on how they responded to us asking them, how quickly they were able to log on after we reached out to them.
Oh, sure. What order do they want?
We were going to go with Greta Stahl first, then Tracy Kronzak, and then George Butcher.
Okay, excellent. And I think just while we're just about to get started, we can talk about it later, but I think for the schedule for the next time, we don't need the 5-minute intervals, and that's how we should plan it accordingly, I think.
Will do, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, so we're welcome back, everyone. We're here at 7:15, and we're on to the next tranche of applicants, and they were kind enough to accelerate their interview schedules, and really appreciate that. So the first person is Miss Greta Stahl, I believe.
Yes, sir. Greta Stahl, please unmute yourself and turn your video on. We are promoting you to panelist.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, we can see you. Thank you for accelerating your interview time. Really appreciate it. And thank you for filling out the application and spending your time with us this evening. We have 5 questions, one from each of the council members, and we'll begin with Councilmember Bonanno.
Hi, good evening, Ms. Stahl. Thank you for applying as well, and welcome. So your first question is, what is the purpose of the general plan and how is it used to guide decision-making?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the opportunity to interview tonight. I'm excited to be part of this process. My understanding of the general plan is that as the city considers what we want the future of Livermore to look like, we want a blueprint, an idea of what the citizens hope for from the future of the city. Anytime a governmental body makes decisions regarding specific issues, it helps to have a set of guiding principles or a vision for the future that we use to help us assess whether or not we weigh one outcome more than the other. What is it that we want the future to look like, and how does that color the way that we might weigh one potential outcome versus another? The general plan gives us an opportunity to hear from the citizens of Livermore, to understand what matters to them, what they value in our city, what makes it an appealing and a special place to live, what are the traditions and the culture that we want to preserve, what are the new opportunities and the excitement of growth that we want to take advantage of, and how do we balance those two things as we consider what the future might look like, as we think about land use, as we think about conservation, as we think about potential opportunities. My hope is that being part of the committee gives me the opportunity to be part of the work, to understand what the city values, what its citizens are looking for from the future, and to use that information to help inform the decisions that the city council might make in the future.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I've got the second question. What are the top 1 to 2 issues that need addressing in Livermore through the general plan update? And how are you a good match for the task at hand?
Yeah, as I consider what lies ahead for Livermore, I think the number one thing is balancing the opportunity of growth with the potential downsides that it brings. And I think that has a lot of different variations. As I think about the impact on housing, for example, which I think will be a pressing issue for us, obviously it's great for the city that this is an appealing place to live. We want to invite a diverse community of residents who come here with all sorts of different cultures and backgrounds and opportunities that they bring with them. But obviously, the more people who want to live here, the higher housing prices go, the more congested our streets become, the more busy our schools and our avenues and our shops are, and that has upsides and downsides. And we have to find a way as a city to weigh the benefits and the challenges that those things are, to make decisions about where do we locate housing? How do we zone housing? How do we consider the benefits of affordable housing with making sure that the citizens who've lived here for a long time still have access to single family homes? how do we make decisions about our school system that ensures that all children in the city have access to good schools, but also ensure that we're not overloading our classrooms and making it impossible for our teachers to do their jobs with reasonably sized classrooms of a fair amount of students. I think we're seeing the same challenge all over the Bay Area, that as this has become an increasingly appealing place to live for a lot of different people, we have seen the challenges that that brings. And unfortunately, I think that's also bringing division to our community in a lot of places. All you have to do is log on to Nextdoor to see people complaining about new developments in the city, and then the residents of those new developments complaining right back about the hardened attitudes of the people who've lived here for a long time. So I both think we have to make good decisions for the city, and we have to find a way to rally all the citizens of the city behind those decisions, so that everyone welcomes our new neighbors and finds a way to make sure they're building bridges with the people who've been here for a long time.
Okay, and the second part of the question was you as a good match for that task?
Yeah, I appreciate the follow-up. I like to think of myself as a person who is very good at understanding the both sides of the issue. I have spent a lot of time in my background working in communications, and before that, working with competitive debate students, if you can believe that. That's probably not a resume that you hear very often. That was my passion as a student and something that I did for years. And one of the things that we taught more than anything was the value of switch side debate. You have to be able to articulate both sides of an issue. And that means understanding both sides of an issue, doing the research to understand the positives and the benefits, to understand that you don't need to vilify your opponents just to disagree with them. That almost every policy proposal that you look at has pros and cons, and you need to be able to understand both so that you're understanding the perspectives of different people, and bringing both perspectives forward to make an informed decision. That's something that I really value in myself, that I spent a lot of years studying and putting to practice into my own work. And I think that that gives me real insight into understanding how we can look at an issue like growth and see both the benefits that it brings and the challenges, and not look at it as all one thing or another.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for applying. Why would you be a good choice for the General Plan Update Advisory Committee, and what one word best describes what you would bring to the committee?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I like to think of myself as having a broad perspective. I'm not a California native. I moved here from Michigan. I was born in Ohio. My parents immigrated here from Sweden. I lived in communities of all different types across Michigan. I spent some time living in England. I lived all over the Bay Area. And I think the benefit of that isn't necessarily that I'm more global than anyone else, but I've lived in communities of all shapes and sizes with different demographic backgrounds. I've seen the impact of rising communities where things are growing really fast. And frankly, I've seen the impact of cities that are coming down. One of the tough things about growing up in Michigan was seeing the impact of departing industries and what it looks like when communities are really struggling. And I think that that's given me a lot of insight into the impact that local community decisions make and the impact of local community government on the average citizen's lives. We tend to pay a lot of attention in newspaper headlines to things that get decided in Washington, when I think, in fact, a lot of the things that most impact our lives are the things that get decided at the local level. I like to bring that open mind and the perspective that I have from my life into the work that I do. And the number one word that I would use to describe myself is curious. I'm interested in learning about other people's lives, other people's perspectives, what the data can tell us about the impacts of the decisions that we're making. I pride myself on being an active listener, not going into conversations with preformed opinions, and instead really seeking to understand before I'm understood, in order to shape my opinion, right? What can you tell me that I don't already know? I'm a lifelong learner. I work in the learning and development space. That's what my job is. And I truly believe that we have something new to learn every day from other people that we don't know ourselves. And I think that that gives me a particularly good mindset to come into work like this, where I think a lot of the work of the general plan is understanding the perspectives of our community, understand what they're looking for out of the city of Livermore, and helping this group translate that vision into words that our residents can rally around and feel really good about. I like to bring people together with the work that I do and try to find common ground with others, even if we don't necessarily start from the same place. I always think that there's some common value, some common core that we can use to build bridges and understand each other better.
Thank you.
All right. And I think that's a really good lead into my question, which is how would you serve the needs of the many diverse residents of the community, even if at times it may go against your personal preference?
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're a little bit inherently limited by our own perspective, right? I'm a white woman. I wouldn't pretend to be otherwise. And that means that I have the lived experience of a white woman who grew up in Michigan and is now relatively affluent and privileged in a wonderful place to live in California. I think that aside from my own situation, though, one thing that I do bring is an acknowledgement of the limitations of my own situation and of my own perspective, and knowing that there are a lot of people whose lived experiences, for all sorts of reasons, whether it's their gender, their race, their sexual orientation, their economic background, is different from mine. And that shaped their experience, it shaped their life, and it probably shaped their expectations of what they want this city to look like. I think because I acknowledge the limitations of my starting place, bless you, it gives me the opportunity to come at it with a more open mind and say, sure, this is how I see it, but I can understand why you might see it differently because your experience has been different than mine. Tell me about what your experience has been. And really, like I said, seek to understand what that has been and why that might inform their opinion to be something different than mine. The more we can come into those conversations without preformed opinions, without an assumption that our experiences have been different than others, it gives us an opportunity to go looking for different answers or to find different common ground than we might have started out with. I mentioned my background in debate before, and I really, truly do believe that that experience with switch side debate in my early youth taught me this idea that it's about debating ideas, not about debating people. We're each bringing different perspectives, different ideas to the table, and my job isn't to try and prove you wrong or to win you over, but to find the best possible outcome for all of us. And acknowledge that I may be right about some things and you may be right about some things. And the goal isn't to be more right than you, but instead to find a way that we can all move forward together.
Great. Thank you so much.
So my question is about the complex nature of these documents. There's technical documents that you'll have to be reviewing and then providing feedback to more technical staff. And then on the other side, translating that information to the general population who come from a variety of experiences and education levels. Can you give me some examples of how you've done that and how you think you could do that well here?
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I was so excited when I read this question because I love to give examples about this topic in particular. So I talked about my background in debate, and I'll mention that as the first one. But as an undergraduate student, we would be tasked with things like understanding the climate policy of the United States and diving into the technicalities of carbon trading systems and being able to fully digest that and articulate to lay audiences why it was that one policy proposal was better than another. And I think I've translated that through my whole career. So I spent 5 years working at a communications agency called Duarte as a speechwriter, where I often was brought in by clients working in very technical fields to help them communicate ideas to non-technical audiences, which often meant that I had to find a way to digest something that was way outside my comfort zone, enough so that then I could translate that information because the engineer, the person who worked on the technical side, was struggling to do so. So in my first month in that job, I, coming from a very non-technical background, would be brought in and they would say, help us explain the cloud to other people. And this was back when nobody understood what the cloud was. And so I first had to figure out even what it was and then figure out how to talk about it. And so I spent 5 years doing work very similar to that. And I've spent the last almost 5 years working in learning and development, which I see as the next evolution of that, where my job is to help my team build training classes where we do essentially that. We translate ideas, context, and help other people learn how to do things that they didn't know how to do walking in. So I really can't emphasize enough how much I value the idea of finding ways to translate concepts, often technical ones, and deliver it and communicate it in ways that makes sense to you, coming from a very different context and understanding what it is that you need to hear and what it is that you need to learn about, that's relevant to your lifestyle. And that has really been the through line of my career more than anything else has. Does that answer your question? Is that helpful? Do you want more?
It does. It's great.
Okay.
I'm also glad you like the question because I wrote it.
Okay, well, thank you, and I appreciate your time that you've given us to fill out the application and the thoughtful answers that you gave us this evening. And we'll be on to the next candidate and proceeding. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was delightful meeting all of you, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Sure. Now we're on to Tracy Krunzak.
Yes, sir. Tracy Kronzak, please unmute yourself and turn your video on. You're being promoted to panelist.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members.
Hello. We're hopefully you've seen our the introduction. We have 5 questions. We cycle through one at a time, and very much appreciate you filling out the application and giving us your time this evening. And the first question is from Councilmember Bonanno.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for being here. Welcome. The first question is, what is the purpose of the general plan and how is it used to guide decision making?
I actually loved this question. Sorry, Brittany, I know you had another question that other folks loved. I love this question because what I appreciate about a general plan is that a city like Livermore, particularly one that's in the circumstances that it's in, which is a huge opportunity for growth, both with population, with diverse communities, as well as the greater metropolitan region, needs a framework by which to make decisions and to understand priorities when it comes to implementing utilization of our land, our transportation, and get a sense of what it is that our communities want. And that is the general plan in a nutshell. It enables not just this council and this mayor, but every future council and every future mayor the opportunity to say, what did we want from ourselves in 2020? And this is actually coming at a great time because of the release of census data that gives us new information about what our community looks like and how that might need to be shaped in the future. What our population wants has been very clearly articulated in the public media, but I think this is a better way of articulating what it is that our city wants for itself in the next coming time epoch. And I would like to think that by participating in this process, some of the ways that we envision our future will not only help set the stage for a more equitable, but also a more inclusive and more sustainable city over time. And those are all priorities that I've already heard in some of the workshops and will love to continue to hear from our citizens.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, and I have the second question. What are the top 1 to 2 issues that need addressing in Livermore through the general plan update? And how are you a good match for the task at hand?
I would say if I could name 2 issues, one would be how do we represent equity in our policies? And that has a lot of subcontext to it. And also how we enable our citizens to truly feel like they're part of a city. And what I mean by both of those is that if you look at something as simple as zoning laws, particularly even the history of zoning laws, there were always things that were created to include some and exclude others. So we have an opportunity now to set a new foundation for how we want to look at those kinds of policies. And by doing so, define the kind of urban centers we want, the kind of business corridors we're seeking. You know, I've seen debates whether or not we should do a second downtown over at Springtown, for example. So all of that are considerations that we should look at equitably and say, well, who are going to be the beneficiaries of this, and what are the outcomes we want them to have by prioritizing this in our general plan? And I think, therefore, by using that lens on the entire general plan, we could just as easily say, where does transportation go, and who is it aptly serving by both things like income and race and participation in our town? Pollution is also another consideration in transportation, by the way. So, really, I think how we distribute our resources equitably over the next period of time is going to be a huge issue, and that's going to represent itself in a lot of little debates. And I think how we want to create a town and a city that says to its citizens, I don't care if you're left wing, right wing, if where you come from, but when you are here, you are a participant in this town and we value your input, and here's all the means by which you can give that. I think those two things together are going to be super critical for what I'm seeing as major changes to the metropolitan region.
Okay, and the second part of the question is how your match for the task at hand.
Yes. I'll answer that by saying I am a believer in a rising tide lifts all boats. And I was schooled in that through not only policy analysis, I have a master's of public administration, but also in doing my undergraduate work, which was studying transitional economies and the post-Soviet regions. And I think that I have had a very variegated background, for lack of a better term. I've personally experienced what it looks like when policies fail people. I have been very honest about the fact that I've been near homeless twice in my life, and I see all the sort of ways that the things that should serve me haven't. I equally now acknowledge and recognize the privilege that I have in a home and in a stable environment. And so I look a lot for what's missing in discussions and dialogues and debates, and try to find people who can supply those missing voices, because that's the kind of folks who are going to help us create that inclusive city that is based on an equitable decision-making framework.
Good. Thank you.
Well, good evening, and thanks for applying. Why
Thank you,
would you be a
Councilmember.
good choice for the General Plan Update Advisory Committee? And what one word best describes what you would bring to the committee?
I'll start with the one word. I actually had to really think about the one word because I was ready to say something very deterministic, like experience or, vision. Actually, the word that I would bring is joy. I think we have an enormous opportunity to really be excited about this as a town, and therefore I'm excited about it. Like, I'm actually happy about it. So joy. And to a greater extent, council member, I would say that I have had a number of experiences in my life that have put me in things like boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies, as well as very humiliating public circumstances. And the totality of those together, I think, enables me very clearly to not only engage with whatever audience is in front of me, but also help build bridges. And that's the one thing that I have really tried to focus on in the latter days of my career, is building bridges. So it's easy to be a believer in something, but it's a lot harder to allow others to have their beliefs next to you. And I think I've had a lot of lessons in understanding what that looks like in my life.
Thank you.
And once again, we have a really nice transition to my question, which is how would you serve the needs of the many diverse residents of the community, even if at times it may go against your personal preferences? Feel free to shorten this answer if you feel like you've already answered it.
A little bit, but the one thing I will add, council member, is I think that we as a culture look at things from a very sort of, I have a piece of pie and you don't perspective. So one of the things that I have had to learn is how to communicate that even though it looks like some folks are receiving, different or special, or however you want to put it, privileges or attention in our world, it's about where we're all starting from and what starting lines we have come from that can give us the illusion that we're working with finite amounts of privilege. And in fact, that's not true. What's true is, I would want to ensure that we are very well equipped to communicate how this makes us a stronger city together.
Okay. Right, thank you.
So as you know, this document can be complex and technical, and you'll have to translate that information to a wide variety of audiences with different education levels and experiences. And then also, on the other side, provide feedback to that technical audience. Can you give some examples of how you would be a good person to do that job of translating all of that information?
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember. Not my favorite question, sorry. I will say that in the span of my career, as I mentioned earlier, some of my most intimate engagements have been in boardrooms of very high dollar companies, and I've also presented to literal thousands of people. So one of the things that I have learned for myself is to say, what is this room? Who's in it? And ask questions and be curious about what they need to hear from me first before making assumptions upon entering it. The course of my everyday life, I have multiple technical certifications on multiple technical platforms. My job is to advise business owners on where they should take their businesses in the next 2 to 5 years. And you'd be surprised how many application developers actually don't know technology, but they have a huge vision that they want to execute. So sometimes I am put in the place of explaining folks' own technology to themselves. And therefore, I draw on metaphor, I draw on storytelling, I draw on asking a lot of questions about what it is they believe the outcome should be. And ultimately, one of the things that I have also discovered is the most powerful tool on earth in all of my work is simply saying, I don't know, can I have some help? And that's going to be critical, I think, for anybody on this committee, because I'm not an expert in, whatever might come up, sewage systems. I'm not an expert in traffic light automation, but I can say to somebody, I don't know, tell this to me so that I can then explain this to my neighbors who are asking me questions like, why the hell doesn't that streetlight work? And I think that's really the job that is in front of everyone on this committee.
Thank you for not liking the question, I think.
Oh, well, I don't know.
You did all right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate your time and your answers. And we're on to the next applicant. But thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm honored. Thank you, everyone.
The next applicant is George Butcher. George Butcher, please unmute yourself and turn your video on. We're promoting you to panelist. Mr. Butcher, please unmute yourself and turn your video on.
There we go.
Okay, welcome, Mr. Butcher. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for being available earlier than originally planned. I think you may have know the routine by now. We have 5 questions, one from each council member, and really appreciate the time you've spent to fill out the application and to join us this evening. And with that, we'll start with Councilmember Bonanno.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Butcher. Welcome. Your first question is, what is the purpose of the general plan and how is it used to guide decision making?
Well, I did read the general plan actually from 2004. And from what I had read in the introductory material in it, the purpose is to guide the development and conservation for the city and its general area. And it's also the secondary purpose of meeting the California Code section 65300, if I remember the number correctly. And how it does that is, I'm a scientist, so I remember this innate knowledge, you know. The plan does that by describing the background, the goals, the objectives, the policies, and the activities for each one of the elements that constitute the plan. That's it.
And did you want to say anything about how it guides decision-making?
Well, it does that by enumerating the background and the policies and the goals. It forces the writers of the plan to write those down, and that's how it's implemented.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I've got the second question for you. And what are the top 1 to 2 issues that you see that need addressing in Livermore through the general plan update? And how are you a good match for the task at hand?
Yeah. Initially, when I saw that question, I thought, like probably everybody else, noise and housing. But in all honesty, after I read the plan, as I indicated earlier, I actually became neutral on each one of the elements. And I no longer thought that those two are actually the more outstanding of the two, although obviously they're the most vocal in the community, it seems like right now. And I think that the reason they are vocal is that if you think of like a normal distribution, you have these two opposing views on either end, but you think of the people in the middle are the most populous, and they don't really have forceful opinions, and you've got to represent those people and make sure that they have a voice to the general plan. I also noticed, though, that I think that there's a less understood element in the general plan, and that's the community character. And then you wanted to know also how I was a good match, or how I would be a good match. I'm a retired regulatory consultant, as you know if you've read my resume, or what passes for the resume. For over 25 years, I listened to alternating views on very technical matters and had to make a decision on about the correctness of how they apply to a particular organization, and then confirming that or giving them an alternative way to explain how they meet the regulations. And so I think that's why I'm a good match.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thanks for being here, and thanks for applying. Why would you be a good choice for the general plan update advisory committee, and what one word best describes what you would bring to the committee?
For that one, that was the more, even though a short question, that was the more difficult one. I had to really think on that one. What I recalled finally was that wherever I've been asked to help in some form, whether it was in school or the different, this is the third community that my wife and I have lived in, and I've volunteered and doing some kind of community service in each of those after having been asked to them. From all of those volunteer efforts and my own job situations, of course, I've learned to build consensus. And I think that's extremely important, to do that without causing upsets among different viewpoints. And if I had to give you a single word to describe myself, I would say contributor is that word.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I've got the next question, and that is, how would you serve the needs of the many diverse residents of this community, even if at times it goes against your personal preference?
I think I may be the first not to answer this in the previous question, so I get a fresh start. The number one, I do that in my life and professional work by not assigning my own principles and standards of conduct to other people. I learn what theirs are and then apply those to some kind of equalness between us. When discussions occur, I allow the diverse viewpoint to complete their sentences. I don't try to change the subject, and I don't try to cut them off. If I have to ask questions, I use it with begin the questions with who, what, where, when, and why to elicit more in-depth understanding of what that person's viewpoint is. Within the realms of the advisory committee, I would say if I can't build consensus, I would document or ask that the two viewpoints be documented and allow someone else to decide which is the most important or which direction to go. In other words, you respect everybody's point of view, even if you don't agree with it. I would also add to that, good team leadership means that the organizers of the team or the leaders of the team defined ahead of time how disagreement is to be handled so that you have a path for that and you don't end up in a mishmash.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So as you know, this can be a technical document. How would you translate that complex information to people of various education levels and experience levels?
Sure. For me, that's a kind of an easy one. You may have discerned from what I said earlier. I've run consulting firms in the pharmaceutical, drug, medical device, automotive, and aerospace industries for a number of years. And each one of these industries has a set of either federal, here in the United States, federal regulations or standards that have to be followed by that industry. And so I've had to learn the exacting details of each of those regulations and standards so that I can apply them to the particular organization that's hired me to implement that regulation or to refine it, whatever the case might be. I've done that through training, through writing reports, through question and answer sessions. Also, through auditing, according to the particular regulation or standard that I've had to use. And also by giving feedback to, well, I guess that's the second part of the question about the educational levels. I have actually chosen on a conscientious effort to ignore educational levels because I've worked with companies where the chief executive is an immigrant and has no formal education, but yet he's a CEO. And I've worked with companies where the frontline workers are actually PhDs due to the highly technical nature of the work that's involved. So frankly, I just ignore the educational level. I try to talk to everybody at the same level. Usually when I go into a place, I've been welcomed, so I can talk to it. It gives me an advantage to be able to talk to everybody and we can exchange information. And I'm allowed to, through that communication, to understand what is bothering that particular person at that particular time, and then address it and try to solve their problem for them. That's about it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, well, thank you very much again for taking the time to apply and be with us this evening.
Sure.
I think this concludes our list for this evening. We weren't successful in getting the one person who couldn't show. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay, so I think we're concluded. So thank you very much, Mr. Butcher, and we're just about to adjourn. I wanted to check in with the council. And does everybody agree that given our experience this evening, that we can forego the 5-minute interval and just allocate 15 to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, well,
I agree. However, I think it would be really nice to have a longer break when we do, so that we can have dinner in between. So if we can consolidate, that might not be a bad idea.
okay. For those of us who who didn't eat early or late, that's good. Yeah, I think that's fine. So I'll work with the city clerk. And so you're suggesting that we get halfway through and then take a break for 20 minutes, or how long a break?
You know, long enough to eat. I would suggest that we have a brief break, maybe one other brief break for, bodily needs, and then a longer break at some point. And I'll leave it to you and the city clerk to figure out the details.
Okay, we'll
20
figure it
minutes
out.
is fine. 20 minutes, 10, yeah, sure.
Okay, we'll figure it out. We'll go. We got it. Okay, we'll figure it out. And we'll base our experience on tonight. But the key thing is we don't need the 5-minute interval to bring people on and everything else. And some people are very efficient in their answers, and others are very thorough. But I think in all cases, we stuck with our 15-minute window, is what I saw. So I would have, just based on this sample for this evening, we'll presume that the other evenings will go that way as well. Okay, so at this point, we will adjourn to another special meeting workshop on September 30th, 2021 at 5 p.m. And again, it'll be held virtually via Zoom, and it will be the same format as this evening.